Everybody got one? And if you need any catch-ups, there is a folder up here that Pam keeps with extras in it. So if you're missing a page somewhere, let me know. We'll see if we can find it for you. All right. Seems like we've been a long time since we've been into this, right? Yeah, so long that Nell forgot. She actually told Suzanne she's playing hooky. Yeah. You know, you can get in trouble doing that. Being where you're supposed to be. And knowing Nell, she can get into trouble. No matter what. All right, so tonight we're in a section that I just titled Israel's Last Days. And I was talking with Marcia, and she was excited about finding this out or thinking about it. But and I told her, I hope you know I'm not talking about modern day Israel's last days, or we would be in trouble. We probably wouldn't be here tonight. But of course, we're talking about Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and became the father by name of the nation of Israel. And still today, even the modern nation bears his name. Right? So where we are in this is, as you see, about 1689 BC, in Genesis 47 and 48, and that vicinity is where we're starting out. And we're putting the date on that, as you see on page 14, right, on about 1689 BC. So we're getting to a time where Jacob, Israel, his name changed to Israel, nears his death. And where is he? Egypt. In Egypt, right? The family and everybody had gone down there. He's not really an exile to a foreign land. He actually is the patriarch of promise, and they were invited down, given a good place, to stay. They were free people at that time. So he's prospered in Egypt, gaining land and multiplying greatly, a lot of kids in that land of Goshen. And but as you can expect, his heart remains fixed on Canaan, right? That's the promised land. That's where God had promised, and that's where he'd been living. And it was the land that was promised to his grandfather and his father, and now to him. Promised by the Lord. Not promised by his grandfather or father, but promised as part of that covenant relationship. So, knowing that his end is near, he calls Joseph, his beloved son Joseph, right? And the guy of the coat of many colors and dreams and all of that. And he binds him with a promise. Jacob said, I must not be buried in Egypt. I need you to make me a solemn promise that you will not bury me here. So he gets Joseph to promise that he'll carry him back to that ancestral tomb. You remember that cave? And where all the forefathers and foremothers and everything had been buried back in the land of promise. And so it kind of transforms Israel's deathbed into a confession of faith, a belief in the promise of God. That though Egypt might be a place to sustain their life, it is not the future of Israel. And at that time, you've got to understand that that's a statement of faith. Right? They came there, they've been given really good land, they prospered, they were growing, everybody's safe. They're a long way away from the Pharaoh who knew not Joseph and therefore started persecuting the Hebrew people, right? They weren't under persecution. They had it made. This land was better than the land they came from. Around Beersheba and things like this, the land of Goshen, where all of your good cotton comes from now, right? What is that kind of cotton?
Pima.
Huh?
Pima.
Pima, yeah, that they make the good shirts from, and all of that. And so, you know, used to be all your great dress shirts were made from that cotton out of Egypt, right? Maybe it still is, I don't know. Anybody wear expensive dress shirts?
No, but I sleep in some Giza dream sheets.
There you go. That's right, because that Giza cotton, right? That what's his name?
Mike Lindell.
My pillow guy.
Yeah. He uses that cotton for his dream sheets. So if you're dreaming on those sheets, I guess you could thank Israel for it. I don't know. I don't know. But that's what's going on. Joseph then later brings his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, which you recognize the names because they get allotments of land later on. And that he brings them in because Israel's getting toward the end of his life, and it's the blessing time, right? In a very decisive, not accidental, Israel does a prophetic thing. Jacob adopts them as his own. That's why they get allotments later. And he elevates them to full status as full tribes, as equal to the rest of his sons, right? You can see that Joseph is still his favorite, as it was before. He's blind and physically weak, but Jacob is spiritually discerning, it seems like. He deliberately crosses his hands, putting his right hand on Ephraim, the younger one. Now, what about Jacob makes sense in this?
Well, almost what happened to him. He stole the birthright.
He stole the birthright. Remember, he was the second born of the twins. Esau came out first, though Jacob was holding on to his heel, but trying to get in front. But yeah, he tricked Esau. Now, they settled that issue and things like that. But, however, in the story, you remember that it turns out that that was God's intent all along, right? That God chooses not by who's born first. He chooses, as he sees fit. Remember what a covenant relationship is. God does what he says he's going to do. He's going to do it. Doesn't matter what you think about what he's doing. God's going to do it. Now, the covenant on our side is, will you get on board and be blessed or not? Right? And so, but God's part of the covenant is a fixed promise. It's based on a promise. Just like on Sunday morning through Galatians, remember, he talks about Hagar and Sarah, right? And the son of the flesh and the son of the promise. Why didn't he go through Ishmael? He was born first.
He didn't want to.
He didn't want to. Story end. He's God and I'm not. Right? He chooses who he will. So, and so in this, he deliberately puts his... Now Joseph objects.
Right.
Right? That's not the way it's supposed to be, Dad. But God doesn't follow human convention or birth order. God does what he's going to do. And so Jacob blesses them in the name of God who shepherded them all his life, the God who redeemed him from all evil. He foretells that Ephraim will surpass Manasseh, becoming a multitude of nations. With this blessing, Jacob ensures that Joseph has a double inheritance. And probably you could say, not fair if you were the other brothers, but then they might remember what they had done and what Joseph did for them, right, when he could have had them killed. And so they probably kept their mouth shut. So, thus, in Israel's last days, then, It's not marked by decline, but by clarity as to what God is doing in the promise. He secures his burial in the land of promise, and he passes on this faith of what God is doing to the next generation. And I'm sure he'd been doing this all along. I'm sure he'd been saying, now guys, remember, this is not our home. We're just passing through. That holds true today, doesn't it? This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? Right? So, it's true for us. And it's important for us to realize that we're just spending time in Egypt. We haven't gotten to the Jordan yet, but one day we will, and we'll cross over. And just like Jacob, just like Israel, his heart was longing for home. How about you? It's a theme of the Bible, not to be satisfied with this world, but to be looking for what's coming, right? To be looking for what's coming. So, you know, you could preach a sermon from that passage, couldn't you then, in that case, which I think I might have one time or other. So, Jacob dies in Egypt, but his faith never leaves the promised land of Canaan. So the next thing we have there on page 14 is Israel's prophecy concerning his sons. We talked about how that he started into that already, but Genesis 49 is where we really get into these prophecies concerning his sons that actually are real prophecies that come true later on. So as he's approaching death, he gathers the 12 sons. There at first, you know, he gathered Joseph, and then he got Joseph and his 2 boys, and now he's calling them all in to hear what would happen to them in the days to come. So he's not speaking as a father now. He's speaking as the patriarch of the clan, as it were, the patriarch. And Israel, from the very beginning, was a patriarchy. You know, Lot had his group of people. Abraham had his group of people. It was the eldest one in the family that served as the leader of the family, and a whole lot more than family reunions today. It held power. As a matter of fact, you could do a Bill Cosby on children. I brought you into this world, I can take you out of this world. Well, a patriarch in those days could. and probably many did. So he's calling them in. He's speaking as the patriarch, but now he's also speaking as a prophet. And his words sketch moral character, trajectory of history, the role of the covenant for each one of the tribes that are being developed. They're not fully developed yet, but they're being developed as these sons of Israel are starting each one their own group that they're a patriarch over that will eventually become tribes that take part of the land, if you want to put it our way of thinking, that become states in the nation, right? The United Tribes of Israel, or something like that. So, he's forming an early outline of the national history of Israel. So, he begins with Reuben. He acknowledges his birthright, but declares that it was lost due to instability and moral failure. And we, covered those things as it went along, I guess, probably primarily starting with what they did to Joseph, right? But other things as well. Then leadership passes from the firstborn, established this theme that's in the Bible: privilege is forfeited, though, by your character. And that's a theme that we can follow through some Old Testament studies that we'll get to. Simeon and Levi are dressed together. They had a violent zeal at Shechem, and it brought a curse of dispersion, as it were. So you can get by with some things, but God remembers, and character counts. And history is going to transform Levi, scattering them into service rather than having a land. This disbursement that Israel's talking about. Levi becomes the tribe that becomes priests, right? And so they are scattered out across Israel later, and they don't have a place of their own. So that prophecy is coming true. Now you say, of course it's coming true. They were Levites. You don't know that until Mount Sinai. The law had not been given yet. The command of the Levites being what they're supposed to be had not yet happened. So this is prophecy, and the fact that it did happen is fulfillment of the prophecy of Israel. Okay? Now, he turns to Judah. This is a very important one. This reaches the theological summit of this patriarch who walked with God and who was part of the promised covenant of Abraham, the passing on of it. So Judah is promised praise and leadership and enduring rule, that the rule will not leave that house, the scepter will not depart from him, and from his line will come the one to whom the obedience of the peoples belongs. Who's that? Christ, who is actually the Lion of the tribe of Judah, right? So, he's narrowing the covenant down, is he not? This has happened over and over again. Abraham, passes that covenant to Isaac, and Isaac, even though it was trickery, God was in it, and some theologians have even said that Israel was well aware of what was happening. Isaac. You couldn't fool him that bad. Put sheepskin on your arm? Come on, that didn't feel like Esau. And probably the food didn't taste as good as Esau's food, that type of thing. So some people would say, though he was blind, he was not ignorant. So he quite knew what was happening. I don't know, there's different interpretations of that. But the fact is, God worked it out that Jacob was the next one in line. And then here comes Jacob to the end of his life, and he is listening to the Lord, right? He's listening about the covenant. He's already said, that's the promised land, guys, not here. Don't get too comfortable here. We're not staying here. And promise me you'll take my bones there, right? And so he's narrowing now the covenant down. You got 12 tribes, right? And you're going to go into the land, and they're going to be the 12 tribes and all the things that's going to happen and predictions, prophecy that he's making about this. But he narrows it down when he's talking about the promise, when he's talking about the covenant, when he's talking about what God's going to do. It's not going to be any of the others. It's going to be Judah. Why? What do you say, Roger? Why?
Because that's what he wants.
Because that's what he said he's going to do. He's going to carry out the covenant in the way he says. But there's a lot of things attached to this, right? What's the greatest king that Israel had after Solomon, that is? David, and many would say Solomon was greater in wealth and things of that sort. David was greater in faith, right? Where did David come from? From the tribe of Judah. The house of Jesse. Located where? Bethlehem, which was in the area of the tribe of Judah. And later when the wise men come and say, what's the scripture say? Well, it's going to come from the line of Judah, and it's going to be the town of Bethlehem, right? One of the prophets identified. So God has decided that through the line of Judah, would come Messiah, the fulfillment of the covenant with Abraham. Through you, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. You'll be a priest nation to the nations, right? So, he's narrowing down the covenant and the kingship. Not just kingship, but the messianic hope. There's a messianic hope among God's people. Started after the garden, right? The serpent has bruised man's heel, but from the seed of man will come one to crush the serpent's head, right? The first prophecy of Messiah to come. And then over and over again, as we've seen it, you know, as we've traveled along this road, it's been reinforced over and over again. And comes down to the covenant with Abraham. It will be from your seed. And now here's Jacob, or Israel, narrowing it down again. It comes from my seed, and specifically from my son Judah. So Jacob was chosen over Esau, right? Because God said so. And now out of his 12 sons, Judah is chosen over the rest. Right? And Joseph kind of in between. Right? So he's narrowing that covenant down. So the remaining sons receive prophecies. It's kind of shaped by geography, temperament, future vocation. Zebulun is oriented toward trade and the sea. Issachar toward labor and agriculture. And Dan is portrayed as cunning and capable of surprising strength, while Gad lives between vulnerability and victory, kind of in between. Asher enjoys abundance, and Naphtali is marked by freedom and eloquence. So Israel's words are sort of showing what the future of Israel and how they'll piece together into a nation. His words toward Joseph are the most expansive. Surprised? Yeah. I'd be surprised if he didn't have another coat of many colors for him right there. It said Joseph coming. But Joseph didn't need it that time. He probably had a lot of gold he was wearing, right? He was second in the kingdom of Egypt. So he probably had plenty of clothes. His dad didn't have to help him with that. But it's the most expansive. Joseph is a fruitful bough, blessed above his brothers, despite suffering hostility. Israel didn't forget what the boys did. Right? And probably neither did God, although they were forgiven. His strength comes from the mighty one of Jacob, and his blessings overflow land, womb, and future, and generations. Joseph stands as a model of faithfulness under pressure and becomes a channel of preservation for the entire family. And Israel is not forgetting that and bringing his blessings on that. But there was one more son of Rachel, Benjamin, you know, the one that Joseph kind of scared his dad to death about by saying, you got to bring Benjamin over here, and then saying, we're going to keep him. He loved those two because he loved Rachel most of all. And so he finally comes to Benjamin. He relates Benjamin as a fierce wolf. Intensity, courage, survival. It'll characterize his tribe's warriors and leaders as we follow through Israel's history, the nation of Israel. So Israel completes his task at that point. He completes what God had designed for him to do. He had a lot of struggles, didn't he? He was a liar and a cheat, and he got lying and cheating thrown back in his face, and married the wrong woman, was tricked into it, and all kinds of stuff, and tricked his brother, and was afraid his brother was going to kill him, and God bring reconciliation between them, and you know, he had his ups and downs, but as time went on, he became the person to carry on the covenant that God intended. So he completed his task. He blesses them all according to their destiny, and he prepares, as sometimes the Bible says, to be gathered unto his people, right? To go get on the other side of the Jordan, right? So this prophecy seems to transform these 12 sons, be important in transforming these 12 sons into 12 tribes. As he pronounced these prophecies of God, you can imagine they, as they were building their families, right, building their own tribe, that as they were doing so, they obviously would probably carry with them in their mind the prophecies that their father had placed upon them from God. And so they probably would each then kind of develop, and you think about the future, some of them were told that you're going to be agricultural in nature, so they probably developed in that way because of the prophecy that Dad gave to me, right? And so when they get to, as a nation to Israel, that tribe will be available and useful in feeding the nation, right? A warrior like Benjamin, right? And Gad being kind of tricky but yet tough, right? Dan, I should say. And so it kind of shaped things because the boys, the leaders, were shaped. Isn't it true that leaders have a great deal to do with the shaping of people and nations, for the good and for the bad, right?
And that's still relevant today.
Still relevant today, yeah. Leaders are important. That's why Christians should vote, right? And vote your conscience. Vote as God directs you. Because that person that you're putting in office, whether it's a mayor or whether it's a president, has great influence on what goes on. Dan, great strength there in Dan. But we'll find as we go along that they thought they were so strong, they didn't need the rest of them. And that they could have their own great altar and place of worship. You can walk to and view it in the ruins today, of where Dan tried to go on their own to say, we'll worship God as we say, when they should have known the lesson from Cain and Abel, that you'll worship God the way He says, or you won't worship Him at all. Pride goes before the fall. That's just a little bit of indication that these characteristics that in the prophecy can be good, they can also be a little bad if they do not carry them out in the right way. He finally dies. I think it's kind of cool that it seems like his mind stayed sharp right to the end, right? And there's purpose in that because God had prophecy to express to the whole nation through him, right? So we find this putting it about 1689, Genesis 50. Also it's mentioned in Acts chapter 7. He dies in Egypt, right? The moment is marked, it seems, by profound grief and extraordinary public honor in Egypt. This shows you that the relationship was still very good in those days. We can't suppose that Egypt was always bad to them, especially when Joseph was still second in command and that Pharaoh himself understood the spiritual leadership of Joseph, right? Because of the dreams and things of that sort, and everything he said came true, and it made them very rich and influential in Egypt, and so everything was good at this time. Joseph is, of course, a ruler in Egypt, right? He falls upon his father, he weeps, he kisses him. It's an intimate, serene story at the close of a great patriarch of the Bible. And let me just say that many people, including myself, believe that those thrones around in Revelation, the 24 thrones around the seat of God, and you know John was kind of in the back and he was crying and stuff, and one of them turned around and shushed him. It's kind of a funny thing. You don't think Revelation's funny, but there's some funny things in there. In the whole Bible, it's Hebrew humor, it's dry, you know. But will you just shut up? You're disturbing what's going on. Many people believe, as I believe, that you have 12 patriarchs and 12 apostles. You say, who is that 12th apostle? It's not Judas, right? Is it the replacement? No, I think it's Paul. I think he's the last one and the apostle sent to the Gentiles, right? So, so Israel passed on and went and took his place on a throne around the throne. How about that? Isn't that cool? And so he didn't stay in Egypt. He found out that it wasn't as important as he thought to get his bones back to the promised land. He found out what the real promised land was. Isn't that cool? And we will too one day, right? So, so he dies, a lot of grief, a lot of honor and things given to him. So Joseph, who has the power to do so, orders Jacob's body to be embalmed according to the Egyptian custom. He became a mummy. He was a daddy, then he became a mummy. That sounds like something you would say. And we're told that Egypt went into mourning. So, you know, this is a pretty cool thing of the influence of Israel and his boys and Joseph in particular, and their influence they had on this great nation of Egypt for 70 days. That's a pretty big funeral, right? We go on quite a bit for the death of a president, but we don't go 70 days, for heaven's sake. You know, it's good to mourn, but that's a little extreme, isn't it? But we know that that's typically reserved in those days for royalty. So why would he get the type of treatment that royalty would get in Egypt?
Because of his son.
Because his son was royalty, right? And so that extends to the family, at least to the immediate family, I would guess. So the nation's lamentation over Israel's death, it underscores how deeply the God of Abraham and the covenant had worked within a foreign nation. You know, sometimes we might miss that. Does the work of God and His intent extend to other nations?
The entire world.
To the entire world. What was the covenant to Abraham? Your seed will be a great nation, and it will be a priest nation to the nations. A priest, you know, leads people to God, right? An intermediary. We only have one now, and that's Jesus. But they were to be a nation of priests. And through them, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And we'll see this in the Old Testament coming through. Let's take the book of Jonah. What was the concern of God with the prophet Jonah?
Nineveh.
Yes.
Nineveh, which was what? The capital of Assyria. Assyria, yeah. They conquered Samaria. Of Assyria, a demon people. I mean, they were bad. If you study their history, and there's a lot you can study because of what we've mentioned about the clay tablets and things from that area, of what's going on right now, administrative tablets and things as the nation of Assyria is building up. They kept great records, and their records are still being found. Sometimes they'll find a catch of hundreds of those clay tablets with cuneiform writing on them, and they find out even more, right? So, but God was concerned over Nineveh, right? And so this thing of it being just for us, unfortunately here in America, there are those over the years that have formed an opinion that we are God's people.
We're God's ambassadors.
Part of them.
Yeah, yeah. That we're the only ones that can get missions done. Sometimes missionaries go out in another country as though that country's never seen the gospel and there's nobody there that knows anything about it, only to find out that God's got His remnant and His people everywhere on the face of the earth. Right? And missionaries have learned long ago, Southern Baptist missionaries have learned, you find God's people where you are and you work with them because they know it better than you. Right? And so, for heaven's sake, there are people that say the King James Version of the Bible is good enough for Paul. It's good enough for me.
You say it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me.
Good enough for Jesus. It's good enough for me. Heaven's sake, 1611 is when that came out. I believe that's a millennia and a half after Jesus before that book was put out, right? And of course, it's the authorized version because the king authorized it. And it's named after the king. And his name is put in the New Testament as an honor to the king. There were no Jewish people named James. Right? So I hope we don't blow your mind on that. Did God use the King James Version? Sure did. Why is it the only one that people in America had back in the early days? It's because the Church of England owned the printing presses. And our forefathers Baptists, who the Church of England persecuted, by the way, we wanted the Geneva Bible, if we could get our hands on it. Why? It was published in Geneva, Switzerland, among free people who were not influenced by a state church. They couldn't get their hands on many of them because we were persecuted. You realize the Church of England threw many of your forefathers Baptists into jail for preaching when they had not been ordained by the Church of England. And what is that church named in our day and age? Here in America?
Anglican.
Anglican. The Anglican Church is the Church of England. Just like the Presbyterian is the Church of Scotland. And Lutheran is the Church of Germany. Right? These were oftentimes our enemies. Not that I'm saying you should count people that go to these churches as enemies. I'm saying they persecuted your fathers. Why were we called Anabaptists? Because they said we're against baptism. Why? Because we didn't accept infant baptism. We made them be immersed. So they said, you're against baptism, Anabaptists. And we said, okay, sure, we're against that kind of baptism. We want to do it the way the Bible says. And it stuck with us Baptists. We sort of said, we're not against baptism. We're for baptism. Done right. Right? A little free church history there tonight. How about that? That's a long ways down the road from where we are in the chronological study, but I think it applies to these things. So, for 70 days, they lament Israel's death and how deep their impact was on Egypt. So Pharaoh's court grants Joseph permission to fulfill his father's oath. Israel must not be buried in Egypt. And Joseph keeps that commitment he made. So a vast funeral procession departs from Egypt and goes across the way that Egypt will escape later over to Canaan, including Joseph, his brothers, Pharaoh's officials, elders, chariots, and horsemen. Have you ever thought about that and remembered that that's what happened? Chariots and Pharaoh's people and God's people all marching together, marching to Zion. Well, not all the way to Zion, but across over into Canaan. I just think that's amazing to me. What can God accomplish? Well, He can accomplish a lot, right? He can turn a whole nation around. So they pause at the threshing floor of Atad, east of the Jordan, and where they observe an intense 7-day lament. I thought 70 days would have probably been enough, but I guess they wanted the people there to hear it too. So they go another week. It's so striking that the local inhabitants renamed the place Abel Mizraim, and that means the mourning of Egypt. So the people in the land of Canaan, the Canaanites, whoever was around there, close by that place, they gave it a name, and they didn't name it the morning of the Jews, of the Hebrews. They named it the morning of the Egyptians. I just find that to be amazing, of what an impact the people of God can have on a nation. Should we have that similar impact today?
Yes.
I think it's a theme of the Bible that we're supposed to be impactful, right? We're supposed to be influential. You can map that all the way down to the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You are, tag, you're it. Nothing else is. Nothing else can be the light of the world. Nothing else can be the influential salt of the world. It's the church. It's us. Right? Just like Israel had his people and his boys to understand they're covenant people. They're different. And the whole nation responded to it positively. Maybe sometimes the way the nation responds to us is not quite positive. Might be a little bit our own fault. Is that fair?
True.
So maybe some of our forefathers, and maybe even churches and Christians today, don't particularly follow the teachings of the Lord on the Sermon on the Mount, for example. And so they cease to be the influence they're supposed to be. And therefore we lose our impact upon a nation. I will mention again Charlie Kirk. And the numbers of people, the millions of people that both attended and also watched that funeral from all over the world showed that one person willing to give themselves, agree with them or not on some of the points made. You know, Charlie was very outspoken, obviously. But he didn't beat around the bush about salvation, about the gospel, right? And so, and now his widow is having a revival meeting going from city to city across the United States right now. I forget, what was the phrase that Charlie used about getting people into heaven? That's the title of it, in other words. I can't remember what it is, the statement he made. That kind of influence. And so when it came time to bury him, there was a lot of people mourning. Now, I don't believe that everybody in Egypt, believed or accepted the God of the Hebrew people, the God of Joseph, and all of that. But all the leadership were there, right? And it shows the possible things that can happen. He died in exile, but he was buried, of course, in the Promised Land, and it shows that the promises of God, as he expressed on his deathbed, that was the Promised Land. That's where they were headed. His body's carried toward the land sworn to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? That Egypt is a place of provision, but it's not a place of destiny. This world is a place of provision, right? You work, you get food, you raise families. It provides for us, right? But it's not our place of destiny. But sometimes we make it that way, right? We get that backwards. But we got to remember, what should it profit a person if they gain the whole world and lose their very soul? It's about destiny. Centuries later, and we keep coming back, especially during these known stories of the nation of Israel through the Old Testament, through Genesis, that Stephen, when he preached, right, in his day, the deacon Stephen, by the way, not a preacher Stephen, not a pastor Stephen, not an apostle Stephen, the deacon, he was one of those 7 in Acts chapter 6, and all of them had Greek names. Stephen is a Greek name. But he recalls these things. So in chapter 7 of Acts, verses 15 and 16, he summarizes how the patriarchs, including Jacob, died in Egypt, yet were ultimately associated with burial in the Promised Land. He kind of compresses the story and highlights things as a theological truth. Israel's story does not end where its people die, but where God promises to lead. It's not where you die. It's the ultimate destination. Is that encouragement to you? It is to me. Right? His death becomes a bridge. It's closing the patriarchal age, as we call it. Closing that up. And it's pointing toward what's coming next, the great Exodus, right? The return and the fulfillment of the promises. So, now we get to page 15. I told you we get to page 15 tonight, but not very far into it, but I had to go ahead and do it. The whole page, even though we won't do all the whole page. The burial at Machpelah. I'm putting at about 1689. You'll find people want to argue the dates. It doesn't matter. You've got to just pick a date of the flood and go from there, right? Some people put it at different times. It really doesn't matter what you say BC because they didn't have that calendar then. There was no BC or AD. That happened much later. So Genesis chapter 50 is where we're seeing this. So after the great funeral procession from Egypt and their 7 days of what they were doing there, the sons of Israel carry their father to the ancestral burial place, the cave of Machpelah. There are people in that land that claim they know where it is. There's no evidence whatsoever. You know, in archaeology you have the known place, which you know that is where it happened, right? Then you have the traditional place. That's people have traditionally passed on that that's the place. And that's somewhat good. Then you have the celebrated place. That somebody just picked a place to celebrate it. So, so we don't know exactly where it is, but there is a place. I think if I remember right, there might be more than one place that they try to celebrate this. But it's in the land of Canaan. They lay Israel to rest beside Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah. So the family's faith is anchored in the soil of the Promised Land. Right? Though he died in Egypt, he's gathered to his people in his land that was promised. So the burial is complete, and the brothers return to Egypt, and fear starts to arise. Why are they getting afraid on the way home?
Now the father dies.
And Dad's not here to protect us. Joseph's going to finally get us. Does that show they didn't believe Joseph? He said, we're okay. What you meant is evil, God is used for good. Yeah, they haven't gotten rid of that guilty conscience yet, have they? And that just goes to show it can hang with you if you don't accept forgiveness when it's given. Forgiveness cancels out fear. This is another theme of the Bible, right? God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. If you're fearful, who does that come from? It's just a simple, sometimes the answers from the Bible are just simple, common sense things. Fear comes from Satan. Faith and courage comes from God. Right? So measure yourself by it. When you find yourself afraid, you got to stop and say, what am I afraid of? If God is for me, there you go. So it cancels it out. That's what God does. It's a theme in the Bible. That faith cancels out fear. But and forgiveness is part of that, right? Having faith in God's forgiveness. In this case, the brothers having faith in Joseph's forgiveness, which I think is representative of God's forgiveness in the story. So, they think he's going to seek revenge now. So they send a message claiming what?
They got a letter from the father.
Yeah, we got a letter. We got here a letter from Dad. We just happened to find it. It was stuck up under his mattress. And they fall before Joseph and say, look, Dad said you have to forgive us. You don't have to trick Joseph to be forgiven. He represents the heart of God in the story, does he not? And he did very well through his whole life. And for us, we don't have to trick God into forgiving us, do we?
I would like to bring up, I think it's harder for people to forgive themselves than anybody else, and I
Yeah.
think this is part of it.
That is true. And along with that, just the same as with these guys, they thought they had to somehow maneuver that because they couldn't forgive themselves, so they couldn't imagine Joseph forgiving them. And for us, we sometimes think we got to maneuver some things because we can't forgive ourselves, so we can't imagine God forgiving us. Right? But that's lack of faith, isn't it?
Yes.
If he says he forgives you, he forgives you. You remember that passage that when we are faithless, he remains faithful? Because he will not deny himself? What does that mean? He said he would forgive us, he would save us, and he keeps his promises. We might be faithless, but God never is. Right? He keeps his promises. As Joseph kept his promises as well. So Joseph responds and in one of the, I would say, one of the clearest theological statements in Genesis. He weeps, not in anger, but in grief, that fear still governs his brothers. He refuses the role of judge. He says, am I in the place of God? Right? That's a statement that ought to be said to ourselves many times, right? When we get overly judgmental, when we seek vengeance, when we don't understand that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? It's not our job. We should forgive as we've been forgiven. We should love as we've been loved. And it broke his heart that they didn't trust him and what he said. That they didn't get it in their heart that he loved them and only wanted the best for them. And it was stupid anyway. How could they think that Jacob was the one protecting them from Joseph's wrath when Joseph was the second in the kingdom? They could have had them all killed to start with. And it broke his heart. And sometimes it breaks our heart when people question the truthfulness of our heart and what we're about. I know many church leaders and many pastors suffer from this, especially in our day and age in America, where pastors stand up and truly from their heart seek to share God's word to do what's best for the people, and then the people question their motives. It's a heartbreaking thing, which I have experienced. And if you've led much in churches, Suzanne, yeah, you have experienced. Brenda, you know. So we have to remember this. It broke Joseph's heart. He said, I'm not a judge over you. Who do you think I am, God? He acknowledges their guilt. You know, he said, what you intended as evil, God has used for good. You don't have to lie about it. But yet, he interprets the entire story through God's sovereignty. The whole story, Joseph always saw it as God's sovereignty. God intended it for good, to preserve many lives. What they did, God used. He doesn't see it as something he should hold against them. Joseph transforms betrayal into testimony. Right? Joseph reassures his brothers, of course, and promises that He'll provide for them and their families like He'd been doing, and He'll continue to do it. He speaks kindly to them, as the Scripture would say. So this family that was once fractured through jealousy, violence, now is shaped into forgiveness and peace. And this is what God's intending. Because for God, it wasn't about the 12 boys. It wasn't about what they did to Joseph. It was about what He was doing to shape a nation. Right? And sometimes we get caught up into it's all about me. And the boys were caught up into that. It's all about them. Thank God Joseph understood. No, it's all about God. It's not about me. That's a good theme, isn't it? Through the whole Bible you find that theme. It's not about us. It's about God and what He's doing. So the burial at Machpelah, it closes two stories. It's the completion of Israel's journey on earth and his time as a patriarch. And it also starts the story of the nation of Israel binding together as one nation that they will have to be when the time comes. They're far from it yet, but it's starting the process of them getting to that point. What's going on in the nations over this period of time? And when I say that, I'm saying things, just highlights. We can never, it would take us 2 hours to list all of the events in the world during the time of 1688 to 1641 BC. So just to hit some highlights, there's strong urban recovery. You remember we mentioned before that cities were sort of collapsing and things because of that third great famine that was happening. And people were migrating here and there. It wasn't just Israel and his family. And there was a lot of falling apart of these city-states. But it's starting to recover now at this point. And regional powers are starting to grow up. They're moving toward regional powers that will move toward different empires, as it were. And they're getting there. There's an increase in long-distance trade, they tell us, during this time, particularly in tin, copper, and textiles, clothes. And so trade, long trade routes. There's increasing cultural interaction in the Near East with other places, all the way to India and out on sea routes out of the Mediterranean and things of that sort. So trade is really building up. And the first of what we would call a real empire in China is starting to develop at that time. And consolidation in Egypt. You remember when we first started talking, we'd say over a 7-year period of time, here's all the pharaohs that were listed. You know, some of them were big pharaohs, some of them small pharaohs, but there were a lot of different kings, you know. Now they're starting to consolidate into one pharaoh controlling upper and lower Nile, and that kind of comes and goes as time goes along. So after that famine is over in Joseph's time, the world is sort of recuperating now from that great famine that happened. And oh, by the way, you know, we're not protected from a great famine here either in the world. If all of the crops of the world failed in 1 year, we'd all be scrambling to eat. And we're not guaranteed that that won't happen, right? I hope we don't have a big locust storm or something. Then we have the death of Joseph. Joseph, I'm getting very close here at the end of today's lesson, Genesis 50, also in Hebrews. In the final years, Joseph remains in Egypt, having lived to the age of 110. That sounds like a lot, but his forefathers lived a lot longer than that after the flood. But we've gotten down to 110, sounds good. He's had a full and honorable life. He sees Ephraim's descendants to the third generation as a sign that God's promise of multiplication is unfolding in the land. As death approaches, Joseph speaks not as Egypt's administrator, but as Israel's covenant heir. So, yes, Judah was pointed out as the covenant will be fulfilled through you, but the heir to the promise is Joseph. Okay? Judah's part in it's going to come, of course, years later in Israel. So his people, they'll be brought out of Egypt to the land sworn to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to anchor that hope beyond his lifetime, Joseph makes the sons of Israel swear an oath. When God delivers them, they must what?
His bones back.
Carry his bones back. You know, he took his father over there. Now, I want you all to promise you're going to take me over there. And he dies. He's embalmed in Egypt to the customs of the Egyptians, so he becomes a mummy as well. And Israel's greatest statesman rests unburied in the promised land, his coffin standing as a silent witness to faith yet unfulfilled. Unlike his father, Joseph is not immediately returned to Canaan. His remains wait, bridging generations, holding Israel's hope. God is doing this. You are going back to the promised land. And this mummy in a sarcophagus that is Joseph in an honored place, it's going to sit there, but you're going to carry it back. So the promise is held there for them. For generations, it's held there. Hebrews interprets this moment as an act of faith. You know, the heroes of the faith. Joseph's greatness is not measured by his power in Egypt, but by his confidence in God's future redemption, Hebrews tells us. His final command turns death into expectation and a coffin into prophecy. Right? So Joseph, in his death, remains a sign of faith in the covenant. He dies in Egypt, but his faith points forward to the Exodus, to inheritance, to the certainty that God's promises outlive his servants. Isn't that true of us? How many people you know, faithful servants of the Lord, that are gone on? But God's promises are still alive. Right? Never ends. So, Israel's multitudes in Egypt, these passages talk about how that they prosper, how they grow in the land of Goshen. Exodus talks about the growth of Israel. It's sort of in creation language. It says they're fruitful, they multiply, they fill the land. Things of that sort. That's sort of the creation story, right? Go forth and prosper and multiply and fill the land. So this multiplication then brings fear to another person. The Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. Right? And so that's where we're leaving it tonight. An ominous thought that there finally comes a person that says, who is that jerk over there in that sarcophagus? Who does he think he is? He wasn't a Pharaoh. All right. Any comments or thoughts as we finish tonight? Yes.
I was one of those kids that if my daddy told me something, I would say, why? And he'd say something else, and I'd say, well, why? Well, why? And I just really appreciate this study because it is helping me to see how the Bible will answer all my life.
Yeah, they're all answered. By the way, Marilyn, that got Socrates killed. The Socratic method, going around asking people why. Yeah. Where are you going? Going to the market. Why? I need to buy some groceries. Why? Well, my family needs groceries. Why do they need groceries? And he was seeking to get to the basis of truth, and they made him drink hemlock because he got aggravated. So you got to be careful with asking why all the time. It's all right with kids, but not a grown philosopher. Any other comments or questions?
My dad, he passed away a year to the day that Tim died. They both died on March 3/16. I thought that was really interesting. Anyway, 2 days before Dad died, he was under hospice, and he wanted all of us kids to come and be in his room. He wanted to say, I don't want it to be a sad time, and he was still had his mind, he was clear. We thought it'd be weeks before he would pass away, but we had the best, and it reminded me of Jacob having all the
Calling them
kids.
all in.
Yeah, it was I will never forget that time. We laughed about just things, family things, and Mom had already passed away, and but we as kids, and then who couldn't be there, all the grandkids were there except mine, well, Ashley, who was in California. We FaceTimed with her, and Dad he went one by one, all of us, to say what he appreciated about us, and just how, just different things that he saw in each of us. And it was just such a memorable time. I will treasure that.
And that's the exact picture of
It
Jacob.
was. I just sensed
Yeah.
that, it was a great day. And 2 days later, he passed away, and we never expect that, but we all still talk about that treasured time.
2 days later, he was gathered to his people.
Yep, it was awesome, an awesome time.
Yeah. These are real life events. And you know, the scripture doesn't record everything that's said, the pertinent things. So I'm sure there was some kidding around and brothers giving it to each other and all the stories being told. And Dad, tell us again about how you tricked Uncle Esau. I don't know, but I can imagine, But yeah, that's the exact picture, isn't it? Yeah. All right, anything else? Well, let's pray then. Father, once again, we thank you for the faithfulness of Jacob, Israel. We thank you for the faithfulness of Joseph. But Father, we thank you for your faithfulness most of all. That through it all, as Joseph saw, God was working good. He was working out his promise, so that today we might also know that whatever life may throw at us, you are working out your promise, and you are faithful to it. You will never leave us, you will never forsake us, and you will cause all things to work together for good if we love God and are called according to his purpose. In whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen. No. No, I can't. But to log in. It's easy. You just have to have access to it.